Starfleet insists its weapons are tools of last resort, constrained by ethics, and held in reserve for self-defense. But across the canon, nearly every major power fields enough firepower to sterilize a planet within minutes, and treaties never require disarmament. The real function of these weapons is not to win wars, but to ensure that certain wars never begin. And the entire diplomatic architecture of the galaxy is built around managing the threat of annihilation rather than eliminating it. Starfleet publishes a manual on acceptable force. It codifies restraint, proportional response, and the primacy of diplomacy. Federation captains are trained to exhaust every alternative before firing. Phaser banks are set to stun by default. Photon torpedoes carry yield limiters. The official doctrine is clear: weapons exist to defend, not to dominate. And yet, nearly every major power in the Alpha and Beta quadrants fields weapons capable of rendering entire worlds uninhabitable within minutes. The Romulans position plasma torpedoes that can vaporize starships in a single hit. The Klingons mount disruptors on vessels designed for sustained orbital bombardment. The Cardassians engineer planetary defense grids around mass driver cannons. And Starfleet, the organization that insists on restraint above all else, deploys ships carrying enough antimatter to sterilize a biosphere. This is not an arms race that spiraled out of control. It is a system that was designed to function exactly this way. The strange truth about Star Trek weapons is not that they are powerful. It is that their power is managed, normalized, and quietly accepted by every faction that claims to oppose unnecessary violence. The real function of these weapons is not to win wars. It is to ensure that certain wars never begin, that certain threats are neutralized before they require fleet action, and that diplomatic negotiations occur under the unspoken understanding that annihilation is always one command away. Weapons in Star Trek do not exist in a vacuum. They exist inside a framework of deterrence, political signaling, and calculated restraint that shapes every treaty, every standoff, and every fragile peace. And the deeper you examine how these weapons are deployed, how their capabilities are discussed, and how their existence is justified, the clearer it becomes that the galaxy is not governed by ethics alone. It is governed by the managed threat of catastrophic force. The Federation did not stumble into this arrangement, neither did the Klingons or the Romulans. They built it together, layer by layer, across centuries of conflict and negotiation. And the result is a galaxy where every major power maintains the capacity for mass destruction while insisting that such destruction would be unthinkable. The question is not why these weapons exist. The question is how their existence reshapes everything else. Starfleet doctrine prioritizes exploration, scientific advancement, and peaceful contact. The ideal mission profile involves mapping star systems, cataloging anomalies, and establishing diplomatic relations with emerging civilizations. The Prime Directive forbids interference in less advanced cultures. General Order 24 exists as a theoretical last resort, never intended for routine deployment. The entire institutional framework is built around the assumption that violence is aberrant, a failure of mission design. And yet, the vessels tasked with this peaceful mandate carry enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. A Galaxy-class starship, the flagship of Federation exploration, mounts 12 phaser arrays and 2 torpedo launchers. It carries a standard loadout of 250 photon torpedoes. Each torpedo is a magnetically contained antimatter warhead, capable of adjusting its yield from tactical strikes to megaton-range detonations. The phaser arrays themselves can be reconfigured for sustained bombardment, drilling through planetary shields or ionizing atmospheric layers. The ship is not a battleship. It is classified as an explorer, and it carries more destructive potential than most pre-warp civilizations could produce in their entire industrial history. This is not an outlier. Every class of Starfleet vessel designed for deep space operation mounts similar or greater offensive capability. The Excelsior class, the Nebula class, the Sovereign class, all follow the same template. The Miranda class, a workhorse frigate deployed in numbers across Federation space, carries fewer torpedoes but retains full phaser coverage and tactical antimatter payloads. Even the Oberth class, a science vessel with minimal combat capability, mounts phaser banks sufficient to destroy smaller ships or conduct surface strikes. The official explanation is that space is dangerous. Hostile encounters are rare but lethal. Explorers must be able to defend themselves, their crews, and the populations they are sworn to protect. A starship operating light years from reinforcement cannot afford to be helpless. But this explanation collapses the moment you examine what these weapons are actually used for. In A Taste of Armageddon, the Enterprise encounters two civilizations that have waged war for 500 years using computer simulations. When the simulation declares casualties, citizens report to disintegration chambers voluntarily. The system is efficient, controlled, and designed to avoid the physical devastation of conventional warfare. Kirk destroys the simulation infrastructure, forcing both sides to confront the reality of actual combat. He does this by threatening to execute General Order 24, a command that would destroy all life on the planet's surface within 2 hours. The threat is not hypothetical. Scotty confirms that the Enterprise has the capability to carry it out. The weapons are already targeted. The yield calculations are complete. Kirk does not fire. He does not need to. The threat alone is sufficient to destabilize a centuries-old equilibrium and force a renegotiation of peace terms. This is not self-defense. This is coercion through the credible threat of annihilation. The same pattern repeats across the canon. In Whom Gods Destroy, a fleet captain gone insane seizes a phaser and threatens to destroy an entire asylum facility. In The Doomsday Machine, Commodore Decker attempts to detonate the entire impulse engine of a Constitution-class starship inside an automated planet killer, a plan that nearly succeeds. In Redemption, Starfleet vessels establish a blockade along the Romulan border, not to engage in combat, but to signal that any incursion will trigger immediate escalation. The weapons are present. The targeting solutions are locked in. The decision to fire is always one command away, and every faction in the quadrant understands this. The Klingon Empire does not pretend that its warships are explorers. A D7 class battlecruiser is designed for one purpose: to project force across contested space. It mounts disruptor banks with overlapping fields of fire, photon torpedo launchers with combat-optimized reload sequences, and cloaking technology that allows it to position for first strike. The Bird of Prey refines this template into a fast attack platform capable of surgical strikes against infrastructure, convoys, or isolated outposts. The Vorka class and the Neig-Var class scale the same principles upward, adding armor, redundancy, and heavier ordnance. Klingon doctrine does not emphasize restraint. It emphasizes honor, which is a different constraint entirely. A Klingon captain is expected to engage worthy enemies, avoid dishonorable targets, and seek glorious combat. But the weapons themselves are not designed around honor. They are designed to kill quickly, decisively, and in overwhelming volume. A single photon torpedo salvo from a Vorcha class can cripple a starbase. A sustained disruptor barrage can level a city. The doctrine justifies when these weapons are used, but it does not limit what they can do. The result is a fleet that can conduct orbital bombardment, planetary invasion support, and scorched earth suppression operations without requiring specialized vessels. Every Klingon warship is already optimized for mass destruction. The only question is whether the target is worthy of it. This creates a deterrence framework that functions differently than Starfleet's. The Federation signals restraint and threatens escalation only when forced. The Klingon Empire signals constant readiness and threatens nothing, because the threat is implicit in every deployment. You do not negotiate with a Klingon fleet by assuming it will hold fire. You negotiate by assuming it will not and structuring your position accordingly. And the Romulans, characteristically, weaponize the uncertainty itself. Romulan plasma torpedoes are visible. They travel at sublight speeds, giving defenders time to track, evade, or intercept. This seems like a design flaw. It is not. The visibility is intentional. A Romulan warbird decloaks, fires a plasma weapon, and recloaks before the torpedo reaches its target. The defender watches the weapon approach, calculates its yield, and realizes that evasion may not be sufficient. The psychological pressure is immense. The weapon does not need to be fast. It only needs to be inevitable. And when combined with cloaking technology, Romulan vessels can position for strikes that bypass early warning systems entirely. A bird of prey can enter a star system, approach a defended installation, and fire from point-blank range before sensors detect the threat. The target has seconds to react. Most do not survive. The few that do understand that survival was a matter of luck, not preparedness. This is not about winning firefights. This is about controlling the calculus of engagement. A Romulan fleet does not need to be present to influence negotiations. The possibility that it could be present, undetected, waiting, is sufficient. And because Romulan weapons are capable of destroying stations, colonies, or capital ships in single strikes, the cost of miscalculation is total. The treaty that ends the Earth-Romulan War does not include inspection provisions. It does not require disarmament. It establishes a neutral zone and forbids crossing. Both sides retain their fleets, their weapons, and their strategic doctrines. The peace is maintained not because hostilities have ended, but because neither side is willing to pay the cost of resuming them. And that cost is defined entirely by the weapons in play. The Treaty of Algeron formalizes this arrangement. The Federation agrees not to develop cloaking technology. The Romulan Star Empire agrees not to expand beyond the neutral zone. Neither side reduces their offensive capability. Neither side scales back ship production. The treaty does not limit weapons. It limits where those weapons can be deployed, and under what circumstances their use would trigger full-scale war. This is the hidden architecture. Treaties do not constrain firepower. They constrain the conditions under which firepower becomes politically acceptable, and every faction that signs these agreements understands that the moment one side believes it can fire without triggering unacceptable retaliation, the treaty becomes irrelevant. Which brings the analysis back to Starfleet and the unspoken contradiction at the center of its weapons doctrine. The Federation insists that its ships are not warships. They are research vessels, humanitarian platforms, and diplomatic couriers that happen to carry defensive armament. This framing is repeated in official statements, training materials, and treaty negotiations. And it is false. A Constitution-class starship can destroy a planet. A Galaxy-class starship can do it faster. These are not defensive capabilities. They are offensive capabilities held in reserve and deployed selectively under doctrines that emphasize restraint. But the restraint is procedural, not technical. The weapons are always present. The targeting systems are always functional. The decision to fire is always available. And on multiple occasions, Starfleet captains have made that decision. In The Die is Cast, a joint Romulan-Cardassian fleet attempts to destroy the Founder's homeworld using sustained orbital bombardment. 20 warbirds and Keldon-class destroyers focus fire on the planet's crust, intending to penetrate to the mantle and trigger a extinction-level event. The attack is interrupted, but the capability is demonstrated. The fleet was minutes away from rendering an entire world uninhabitable. Starfleet does not participate in this attack. But it does not lack the capability to do so. In the Pegasus, a prototype Federation vessel equipped with an experimental phasing cloak is revealed to have violated the Treaty of Algeron. The project is classified, illegal, and hidden from official oversight. But the vessel itself is a testbed for technologies that would allow Starfleet ships to penetrate enemy defenses undetected, position for first strike, and withdraw before retaliation is possible. The phasing cloak is never deployed operationally, but the research is completed, the data is preserved, and the strategic implications are understood by every intelligence agency in the quadrant. The Federation builds weapons it claims it will never use, deploys ships it insists are not warships, and maintains offensive capabilities it describes as defensive. And every treaty it signs, every negotiation it conducts, and every standoff it navigates occurs under the unspoken understanding that these weapons are ready, targeted, and available. This is not hypocrisy. This is deterrence. The Cardassian Union understands deterrence as well. Cardassian orbital weapons platforms are not subtle. They are visible, heavily armored, and positioned over every strategically significant installation in Cardassian space. Each platform mounts phased polaron beams, photon torpedoes, and planetary bombardment arrays. The platforms are designed to survive first strikes and retaliate with overwhelming force. They do not hide. They do not cloak. They announce their presence and dare anyone to test them. This is psychological warfare as infrastructure. A Cardassian defense grid does not merely protect assets. It sends a message. Any attack on Cardassian territory will be met with immediate, devastating retaliation. Any fleet that approaches will be engaged at maximum range. Any ground invasion will face orbital fire support that can level cities in minutes. And because the platforms are visible, because their targeting systems are known to be automated, and because their response protocols are intentionally inflexible, the cost of initiating conflict is front-loaded into every strategic calculation. You do not attack a Cardassian installation because you hope to win. You attack because you are willing to lose ships, crews, and operational capacity in exchange for eliminating a single target. Most powers are not willing to pay that price. During the Dominion War, this calculus shifts. The Dominion does not respect Cardassian deterrence infrastructure. It does not hesitate to engage hardened positions. It does not negotiate around weapons platforms. It destroys them, absorbs the losses, and continues advancing. The Cardassian defense grid, designed to deter rational actors operating under resource constraints, is ineffective against an enemy that treats casualties as acceptable costs. This reveals the fundamental limitation of deterrence-based weapons doctrine. It only works when both sides agree that certain costs are unacceptable. When one side stops caring about losses or believes it can absorb them faster than the other side can inflict them, the entire framework collapses. And the Federation, for all its technological sophistication, is not prepared for that scenario. Starfleet doctrine assumes that adversaries will negotiate. It assumes that threats of escalation will be credible. It assumes that no rational actor will choose annihilation over compromise. And for most of the Federation's history, these assumptions hold. The Klingons negotiate, the Romulans negotiate, even the Cardassians, aggressive and expansionist as they are, negotiate. The Borg do not. When the Borg encounter the Federation, they do not issue demands. They do not establish terms. They do not respond to threats. They adapt to weapons, assimilate technology, and continue their approach. A photon torpedo that would cripple a warbird barely scratches a cube. A phaser array that could level a city is absorbed and nullified within seconds. The Borg do not care about deterrence. They do not care about casualties. They do not care about treaties. And Starfleet, faced with an enemy that does not respond to its weapons doctrine, is forced to improvise. At Wolf 359, the Federation loses 39 ships in a single engagement. The fleet deploys every tactical innovation available. Coordinated fire patterns, rotating shield frequencies, mass torpedo volleys. None of it works. The cube advances through the formation, destroying ships faster than they can regroup. The battle is not close. It is a massacre. The Enterprise stops the cube, but not through superior firepower. Picard, assimilated and recovered, provides tactical information that allows the crew to identify a critical vulnerability. A single command destabilizes the cube's power distribution network, triggering a cascade failure. The weapon that stops the Borg is not a phaser, it is information. This is the moment when Starfleet's weapons doctrine is revealed to be insufficient. The tools designed to deter rational actors, to signal resolve, and to manage escalation do not function against an enemy that cannot be deterred. And the Federation, unprepared for this reality, is forced to develop new weapons, new ships, and new doctrines designed not for deterrence, but for survival. The Defiant class is the result. A Defiant class escort is not an explorer. It is not a science vessel. It is not a diplomatic platform. It is a warship, purpose-built to engage and destroy Borg cubes. It mounts pulse phaser cannons, quantum torpedoes, ablative armor, and a reinforced space frame designed to survive sustained combat. It sacrifices crew comfort, scientific capability, and long-range endurance in exchange for raw offensive power. And it is effective. But the Defiant class also represents a shift in Starfleet's institutional identity. For the first time since the Federation's founding, Starfleet commissions a vessel class with no pretense of peaceful intent. The ship exists to fight. Its weapons are not held in reserve. They are the reason the ship was built. And once that line is crossed, it becomes difficult to justify why other ships should not follow the same template. The Sovereign class, launched shortly after the Defiant, incorporates the same principles at a larger scale. Heavier armor, more powerful shields, quantum torpedoes as standard armament, and phaser arrays optimized for rapid recharge and sustained fire. The ship is still designated as an explorer, but its design priorities are unmistakable. This is a vessel built to survive hostile engagements and win them. And the Prometheus class takes the logic even further. A multi-vector assault mode allows the ship to separate into 3 independent combat platforms, each fully armed and capable of coordinated strikes. The design is pure tactical innovation. There is no scientific justification for this capability. There is no exploration benefit. The ship exists to maximize firepower, overwhelm defenses, and destroy targets that would survive conventional engagement. Starfleet does not call these vessels warships, but it deploys them as warships, and every other power in the quadrant adjusts their strategic calculus accordingly. The Klingon Empire, observing Starfleet's new ship classes, accelerates production of the Negvar class, a battleship larger and more heavily armed than anything previously fielded. The Romulan Star Empire responds with the Valdor class, a warbird optimized for direct combat rather than hit-and-run tactics. The Cardassian Union, weakened by the Dominion War, cannot match this escalation and instead shifts resources towards smaller, more numerous patrol craft designed for asymmetric engagement. The arms race is no longer theoretical. It is institutional policy, reflected in shipyard production schedules, resource allocation, and fleet deployment patterns. And every new ship class, every new weapons system, and every new tactical doctrine is justified as a response to the last threat, the last war, the last failure. But the real driver is not fear. It is the understanding that in a galaxy where annihilation is always possible, the only reliable security is the capacity to annihilate in return. This is the mechanism. Weapons do not exist to be used. They exist to ensure that certain outcomes never occur, that certain conflicts never escalate, and that certain threats are neutralized before they require military action. The Federation maintains planet-destroying firepower not because it intends to destroy planets, but because the capacity to do so makes it unnecessary. The Klingons field invasion fleets not because they plan to invade Federation space, but because the threat of invasion keeps the border stable. The Romulans cloak their fleets not to initiate surprise attacks, but to ensure that no one can predict when or where an attack might occur. And the result is a galaxy where peace is maintained not by mutual trust, but by mutual fear. The Khitomer Accords, signed after decades of Federation Klingon hostility, do not require disarmament. They establish joint defense protocols, intelligence sharing, and coordinated patrol zones. But both sides retain their fleets, their weapons, and their strategic autonomy. The peace is real, but it is not based on the absence of threat. It is based on the recalculation of which threats are acceptable and which are not. The Dominion War forces this recalculation again. The Dominion fields ships in numbers that dwarf anything the Alpha Quadrant has seen. Jem'Hadar attack fighters are cheap, fast, and disposable. They swarm defending fleets, overwhelm static defenses, and trade casualties at ratios that would bankrupt any other power. The Dominion does not care about losses. It does not care about treaties. It does not care about the rules that have governed quadrant politics for centuries. And the Federation, faced with an existential threat, abandons the pretense of restraint. Operation Return, the assault to retake Deep Space Nine, involves nearly 600 Starfleet and Klingon vessels. The engagement is brutal, chaotic, and indecisive until the Prophets intervene and destroy an entire Dominion reinforcement fleet. Starfleet wins, but not because its weapons are superior. It wins because the enemy's reinforcements are erased by a force outside the normal tactical calculus. This is the moment when the limitations of weapons-based deterrence are fully exposed. The Federation built ships capable of destroying planets. It developed quantum torpedoes, ablative armor, and multi-vector assault modes. It fielded fleets large enough to contest entire sectors, and none of it was sufficient to guarantee victory against an enemy willing to accept unlimited casualties. The war ends not because one side is disarmed, but because the founders are infected with a disease that threatens their extinction. The cure is offered in exchange for surrender. The weapon that ends the war is biological, not kinetic, and the peace that follows is, once again, based not on mutual disarmament, but on mutual exhaustion. The galaxy rebuilds. Fleets are replenished. Shipyards expand. And the same weapons that failed to prevent the war are retained, refined, and redistributed across the quadrant. Because the alternative, unilateral disarmament, is unthinkable. The strange truth is that Star Trek weapons are not designed to win wars. They are designed to make wars survivable, predictable, and subject to negotiation. The galaxy is not peaceful because weapons are absent. It is peaceful because weapons are present, visible, and understood by every faction capable of deploying them. This reframes the entire premise. The Federation's insistence on restraint is not hypocritical, it is strategic. The weapons exist to ensure that restraint remains the default option, because the alternative is mutually assured destruction. The Klingons' emphasis on honor is not romantic. It is a framework for limiting when and how overwhelming force is deployed. The Romulans' use of cloaking technology is not cowardly. It is a force multiplier that allows a smaller fleet to project disproportionate influence. And every treaty, every standoff, and every negotiation occurs under the shadow of these weapons, with all parties aware that the cost of miscalculation is total. The viewer is left with a choice. Either Star Trek depicts a galaxy where advanced civilizations have learned to manage catastrophic force through institutional restraint and diplomatic frameworks, or it depicts a galaxy where the threat of annihilation is the only reliable guarantee of peace. The canon supports both readings, but the weapons themselves, their capabilities, and their deployment patterns suggest that the second interpretation is closer to the truth. Because the weapons are always there, they are always ready, and they are always quietly shaping every decision that prevents them from being used.